Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Supermarkets and other food retailers are warning that leaving the EU without a deal could, in the short term, mean higher prices and empty shelves. The bosses of major high street firms, including M&S, Sainsbury's, Co-op and KFC, have written to MPs saying that the UK is highly reliant on the EU for fresh foods such as lettuce, tomatoes and soft fruit, and that no deal could mean significant disruption to supply. It's the strongest warning yet from the food industry about leaving the EU without an agreement. The government says it's using well-established methods of working with the food industry to prevent disruption. Our business editor Simon Jack has this report.
Nearly 1/3 of all the food we eat is imported from the EU. Today, some of the UK's biggest food retailers, including Sainsbury's, Asda, Lidl, Waitrose and others, warned that a no-deal Brexit could threaten the supply and increase the cost of fresh food.
We need to remember how much we're importing from Europe at that time of year. So about 90% of our lettuces, 80% of our tomatoes and about 70% of our soft fruit all comes from Europe, and it all comes through, near enough, comes through Calais. So disruption at Calais, which is being predicted, would have a massive impact on the shelves of our supermarkets.
So is this a sensible warning or scaremongering?
It sounds like a sensible warning, and I think it's important that the general public are aware that the impact of coming out of the EU is going to have on everyday life.
Looking long term, I mean, not importing loads of food, eating seasonally, having our local produce might be a good thing.
It's purely scaremongering. As far as I'm concerned, it'd do the country good to go without for a little while, make them appreciate what they've had.
Hiya, can I just get one of your lettuces? £1, please. Thank you, mate. And this is from Spain?
Yeah, that's right.
It is from Spain. OK, so there you go. This lettuce comes from Spain. And what retailers are saying is there is no way of stockpiling fresh produce like this. Now, up to now, food retailers have been very reluctant to issue Brexit warnings. They know that millions of their customers voted to leave the EU. The fact that so many of them have come together to put their signatures to this letter is an indication of just how urgent they think the situation is. This letter also warns that if the UK were to leave with no deal, additional international tariffs would be imposed that would push up food prices. If, as some have suggested, the UK set food import tariffs to zero, it would have to apply zero tariffs to imports from the rest of the world, which retailers say could have a devastating impact on UK farmers and would take time to put in place, according to food policy experts.
Britain could get food supplies from all over the place. There's no need to just get fresh foods from Spain, from Portugal, from Italy, from Greece. But the problem is that that has to come through contracts and trade deals, and those aren't quick to sort out. The worry is that we're having to think about these big structural issues in the very last minute of change.
The government insisted the UK's food security is built upon a diverse range of sources, including strong domestic production, which would continue whether we leave the EU with or without a deal. Some of the UK's biggest food retailers are not so confident. Simon Jack, BBC News.
Well, tomorrow MPs are due to vote on a series of amendments to Theresa May's Brexit plan. Two options are being floated, one that would see Brexit delayed, another that would mean scrapping the backstop. That's the mechanism to prevent a hard border on the island of Ireland. Meanwhile, the EU's deputy chief Brexit negotiator said that Theresa May's secrecy during the negotiation process has become a handicap to getting support for the deal now. Our political editor Laura Kunsberg is live for us in Westminster. Laura.
Well, Rita, tension is high, but trust is low. Remember, not so long ago, MPs absolutely threw out Theresa May's compromise deal with the EU that had taken more than 2 years to put together. She was defeated then thumpingly. No question that Parliament would back her deal as it stands. And since then, there's been a real scramble to try to find a way through. MPs tomorrow will have a chance to vote on ideas that they have put forward. But as things stand, there's no guarantee that any one of them will win the day. Time is not actually standing still. But the only thing moving fast round here are the Prime Minister's cars. But while Theresa May tries to find a way forward, MPs tomorrow can pick from a series of different ways through. Some Tory MPs tomorrow will vote yes to Theresa May's deal if its most controversial component can be removed. Remember, the backstop, that guarantee against a hard border in Ireland, no matter what happens in the future. The idea is, for once, Parliament might give a clear picture of what it wants, giving the Prime Minister a chance to make a clearer case to Brussels that the backstop has to be changed.
If we get this amendment through on Tuesday night, that sends a loud and clear message to the European Union. There is something around which a majority can be formed.
But not every Brexiteer is ready to be quite that helpful.
I'm always helpful.
The most ardent Brexiteers are serious about not backing that plan.
The Graham-Brady amendment is being considered seriously by serious people, and that is a serious matter, yes.
And publicly, at least, the EU has ruled it out again and again. And they fear, as each day dawns, leaving without a deal's more likely.
The negotiation on this is in London. There's no negotiation between the EU and the UK. That negotiation is finished. There is a very high risk of a crash out, not by design, but by accident.
But MPs from across all parties in this place are more and more worried that a deal might not be done in time. As things stand, we're due to leave the EU at the end of March, come hell or high water. So tomorrow there'll be a big push to change that, to give Parliament the power to slam the brakes on if the government can't reach an agreement in time.
This is an opportunity for Parliament to seek an extension of Article 50 if we're running into the buffers, so that we don't have a real problem with no deal.
Good morning.
Will you be backing that
Good morning and no comment. Thank you. Goodbye.
But Labour's far from ready to welcome that idea either. It's possible tomorrow night that none of the ideas on offer will get a majority of MPs behind it.
There's still a sort of fast-moving event tomorrow. We don't know how many amendments are going to be going down, but I'm confident that we'll be able to get through over the next few weeks in order to get a withdrawal agreement through.
Sound like ministers or MPs really know what's next? The truth, it's not in any one political tribe's hands. Laura Kunzberg, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, let's get more on those comments by the EU's deputy negotiator on Brexit, in which she said there was a high risk of Britain crashing out of the bloc by accident. Our Europe editor Katya Adler is in Brussels for us now. And Katya, what do you make of her intervention?
Well, I think, Rita, with 60 days now to go till Brexit Day, it's high stakes. So what we heard today from the EU, basically from one of its most senior Brexit negotiators, was a warning, a reminder and a message for MPs. The warning was it takes two to tango, so MPs may well debate amendments, changes to the Brexit deal as it stands, but that none of them will be able to come to pass without the say-so from the EU, whether it's an extension to the negotiating period or changes to the backstop, that guarantee on the Irish border. The reminder was from the EU that two have already tangoed. This Brexit deal on the table, they say, is not something imposed by Brussels on the UK. It was something negotiated with the UK and signed off by Theresa May back in November. And the message for MPs ahead of tomorrow was that when it comes to the backstop, that Irish border guarantee, they are not going to budge. Now, taken into context, Rita, this is the EU intentionally sounding immovable and tough. EU leaders basically think that the Brexit debate still has a way to go in Parliament. So they see no point here in the EU of making any moves now. But that doesn't mean no moves ever, as that threat of a no-deal Brexit looms ever larger in the weeks to come. For now, what the EU has clearly told the Prime Minister is, don't come back to us here in Brussels until you can prove convincingly that you have the majority of Parliament behind you.
Katya, thank you. Katya Adler there for us. Tesco is to cut up to 9,000 jobs as part of plans to simplify its business. The supermarket chain says it's planning to close some of its deli and fresh food counters, but hopes to redeploy half of those under threat. Our Consumer Affairs correspondent Coletta Smith is outside a store in Manchester for us now. Coletta.
Yeah, Rita, it's worrying times for staff here and staff at any Tesco Extra store right across the UK. Tesco are one of the biggest employers in the UK, and we're talking about a figure of 9,000 people whose jobs are at risk tonight. Now, Tesco say they're hoping to redeploy half of those staff, as you say, but that's not something they can guarantee at this stage, and that's a pretty ambitious target for them to go for. Customers are going to see an impact of the changes, because what we're talking about is the closure of fresh food counters in about 90 stores of these bigger Tesco Extra versions. So we're talking about customers that buy fresh meat, fresh fish and hot food from the deli counters. Tesco say that people are shopping differently now. Anyone coming into stores like this are often under big time pressures. They're in and out quickly, and they're just not going as frequently to those fresh food counters. So this has come at a particularly difficult time for Tesco staff in general. They've just come out of 4 years where we've seen 10,000 redundancies already from the company since a new boss came in to try and turn around the fortunes of Tesco and keep their crown as the UK's #1, the UK's biggest supermarket. It's a difficult market for them to be operating in, and they've got plenty of competition snapping at their heels.
Coletta, thanks. More now on our top story and those warnings from retailers of possible food shortages in the event of a no-deal Brexit. It's now just over 2 months until the UK is due to leave the EU, and with the Prime Minister yet to get her Brexit deal agreed by Parliament, people across the country are starting to contemplate what a no-deal might mean for them. Our Deputy Political Editor John Pienaar has been to Kent to test opinion there.
Get it while it's fresh, get it while you can. Some say Brexit with no deal means your £5 a day may not make it to your table if it's imported. Dave, the fruit and veg wholesaler, is more than just worried.
Quite frankly, petrified. The logistic chain could really just grind to a halt, and our business could be terminally damaged.
Let's have a look at your store then.
Mushrooms from Poland, 3 days, 3 times a week. 24 hours in the life of a mushroom is a long time. If that's held up for 24 hours, time it gets here, it's a bin job. Strawberries from Spain, 24 hours again, bin job. Peppers from Spain, slightly longer life cycle, but we want our produce to go out in tip-top condition to our customers that demand it. 24 hours, it's wasted.
Most of our fresh produce is imported, and 62% of the fruit and veg comes from the EU, according to latest figures. But Brexit splits opinion, splits families. Brother Mike runs the farm next door. He has faith it'll somehow work out. Your brother's worried?
I can understand why he's worried, but I don't think there's anything to worry about. I think everything will carry on. It's all in our interest to make this work. The Dutch want the produce to come to us. The French want to keep the ports open. It will work. And farming, I think, can only get better in this country.
Try telling Simon, the road haulier, it'll work out in the end. Cross-channel routes are packed. Over 10,000 lorries alone in a day. Lost time is a luxury he can't afford.
We're already at bursting point through Dover. It's such a bottleneck for export and import trade. We don't have frictionless trade in the freest sense of it now.
So as it is, you're on very tight margins for time and I suppose for profit as well.
Exactly. Well, one is the other. You know, time is money to us. We get paid to deliver goods. We don't get paid to sit in queues.
Maybe so, but here in Kent they'll celebrate Brexit, deal or no deal. English sparkling wine's on the up. One person's problem is Richard the winemaker's opportunity. A no-deal Brexit, it doesn't scare you then?
No, I'm not worried about a no-deal Brexit. We need certainty. We need to know where we're going as a business, as a country. The nervousness of travel will make more people stay in the UK and come and visit.
OK, and those who say champagne's going to run short, you say bring it on, I suppose.
I'm delighted. You know, we're here to fill those shelves, to fill those gaps.
Stir in pasta sauces and loads of pasta.
Away from the hopes and fears of business, Jo is stocking up on food. She can't stock medicines for her daughter, who has epilepsy and cerebral palsy, drugs which for many come from EU suppliers. She's just hoping for the best.
The reason why I'm worried about all of this is without her meds, very, very quickly, like 1 or 2 days, Nora would end up having all those seizures back again. Good girl. Nora can't miss her medication.
In Joe and Nora's home at least, the possibility of a no-deal Brexit is here. It's now. Well over 2 years after the referendum, it's a worry this family could do without. John Pinar, BBC News.
The supermarkets and takeaway chains have until now held back from voicing fears about Brexit. They didn't want to alienate customers who'd voted to leave. But with the distinct possibility tonight of a no-deal departure in just 60 days' time, Marks & Spencer, Waitrose, KFC, the Co-op and others have joined forces to warn of the effects of delays at ports. Price rises and empty shelves will follow, they say, and Eurotunnel has warned it still needs to know from the government what sort of checks it will need for trucks to keep running through the Channel Tunnel. Our economics correspondent, Helia Ebrahimi, has this.
A new sharply worded letter signed by the likes of Sainsbury's, M&S and McDonald's has warned that supermarket shelves will be left empty if the country crashes out of Europe. The warning makes clear that in March the situation will become even more acute as UK produce is out of season, meaning up to 90% of lettuces, tomatoes and soft fruit is reliant on imports from the continent. In the letter, some of Britain's biggest retailers say they're extremely concerned that their customers will be among the first to experience the realities of a no-deal Brexit. They warn of significant risks to maintaining the choice and quality that customers have come to expect. And they say there will be inevitable pressure on food prices from higher transport costs, currency devaluation and tariffs.
The purpose of the letter is to really highlight the risks to consumers of a no-deal Brexit. We really need to ensure that that is avoided at all costs to make sure that we can all continue to get fresh food on our shelves and maintain low prices for consumers.
Tonight, one supermarket boss whose company is included in the letter told me he worried that today's politics had moved beyond the purely rational. Supermarkets' just-in-time deliveries all rely on road transport, and a massive chunk of it goes through here, Eurotunnel in Folkestone.
The stuff that's going through here now goes into our manufacturing industries, it's just-in-time deliveries, it's the foodstuffs on the shelves, it's medicines. So it covers the whole economy. It's £120 billion worth of goods every year. And if it's not clear how we're going to be operating this business in the future, all of that is at risk.
Every hour, Eurotunnel carries 500 trucks between Britain and the continent, carrying an astonishing £120 billion worth of goods a year. That's 25% of all UK trade with Europe.
How damaging is it for businesses not having clarity?
Uncertainty has been the worst effect of this whole Brexit negotiation. The moment the governments get rid of uncertainty and give us clarity on the direction that they're taking is the moment that we can really settle down and deliver things.
Do you think that haulage firms know what to expect?
That's one of the big challenges. The problem across the industry is huge. The lack of knowledge across the industry is one of the most worrying things. Nobody knows what to tell the industry to prepare for.
The man who heads up the UK's Road Haulage Association says the government is in denial about the amount of information needed by truck drivers and is being complacent about the risks.
I don't believe they really do understand the scale of the challenge. The complacency has been around customs believing that their bit takes 6 seconds. It's the hours of work that has to be done to get that information into customs that is the problem.
The negotiation process has been very long and very torturous, and it's not been clear at any stage throughout the last 2 years what the end result would be. And that means we've had to invest an enormous amount of money, and that's not a good way to do business.
How expensive has it been?
For the moment, it's millions of pounds worth of expenditure.
Tens of millions?
Tens is fair.
20 million?
Tens of millions has been spent so far just preparing for the worst case, and tens of millions that we hope won't be necessary.
Companies like Eurotunnel are angry that Brexit has sucked the oxygen out of much of the economy and meant wasting huge sums of money on preparations that may prove pointless. Business bosses will hope for clarity from tomorrow's vote, but given the divisions in Parliament, they are likely to end up disappointed.
Helia Ebrahimi reporting now. Theresa May has told a meeting of Conservative backbenchers that they should instruct the government to renegotiate the Northern Ireland backstop when they vote on amendments to her Brexit deal again tomorrow. She's hoping that if she can show Brussels that the Commons would back her deal without the backstop, they might think again. But in Brussels this afternoon, the EU's Brexit negotiators said that there were no alternatives to the backstop and that EU leaders would not reopen the withdrawal agreement. And it's not clear that ardent Brexiteers in her own party are prepared to follow her plan either. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is with me now. Gary.
We've been waiting ever since Theresa May's thumping defeat in the House of Commons 2 weeks ago to find out what her plan B was. We got little signals about it, long silences, little signals. Tonight, she's kind of given us the strongest indication yet. She's been standing up in front of Tory MPs in there, and she said what she wants them to do is back an amendment, which is to be debated on, voted on tomorrow, we think, which calls for alternative arrangements to the backstop arrangement which is in the withdrawal agreement. Now that's something Theresa May for ages has said can't actually be done. It's all sort of there locked in. So a little way down the corridor, not far away from where she was telling Tory MPs that, there was a meeting of the European Research Group of MPs, the pro-Brexit group made up a lot of the numbers of the people who voted down the agreement, and they said they're not going to back that amendment. So no sooner had she announced a plan B than it seems to have died a bit of a death. One other thing that was happening in that meeting, Boris Johnson piped up and said, well, how can we know what it is you're talking about? Tell us what it is you actually intend to do on Northern Ireland. And she fired back at him, well, you won't find out unless you back me. And that's the kind of response which is failing to galvanise support. Over in Brussels, as you were saying, the chief official who does a lot of the negotiating has been giving a very rare few public utterances, and Sabine Veil said that it looked increasingly likely that Britain might crash out of the EU, and the point she kept making in her question and answer session in Brussels was what they are looking for right now is certainty about the British government's position on Brexit. Well, on a night like this, good luck with that.
On the eve of critical Commons votes, the UK's chief Brexit negotiator, Ollie Robbins, wasn't answering questions.
Can the withdrawal agreement be changed?
He hummed a tune. His counterpart in Brussels took a different approach. Sabine Veil has been at the Brexit negotiating table every step of the way. She's tipped to lead the EU when negotiating on a future relationship actually starts. 2 weeks after the thumping defeat for Theresa May's Brexit divorce deal in the Commons, Sabine Veil's frustrations with her British counterparts spilled out.
Our impression from here is that the discussion in London at the moment is much more about the future of the country and the future of the EU-UK relationship than it is just about the content of the withdrawal agreement. In fact, a lot of the discussion is uninhibited by any knowledge of what is actually in the withdrawal agreement.
She mocked the exact amendment, the Brady Amendment, which Theresa May was about to give her backing to in Westminster.
So the problem with the Brady Amendment is it doesn't spell out what alternative arrangements are. We haven't found them, and the UK negotiators have not been able to explain to us. And that's no criticism of them, because they don't exist. So I think we've collectively done our best, but...
She signalled Brussels would engage with Theresa May if she could prove she had solid backing in Parliament.
There's no point beating about the bush. The withdrawal agreement was defeated with a 2/3 majority in the House of Commons. That is a crushing defeat by any standards. And we need to have a majority which does not just get the withdrawal agreement over the hurdle of the meaningful vote by a narrow margin, but we need to have a stable majority which is there to ensure the ratification, but also all the internal legislation that the UK will have to do. So that is quite a big challenge. And the negotiation on this is in London. There's no negotiation between the EU and the UK. That negotiation is finished.
As the Prime Minister tries to convince MPs she can get a majority together for her deal, waspish scepticism from Brussels. Theresa May has been seeing more figures from her own party today. The brief attempt at cross-party talks quickly faded.
We discussed all sorts of things. The PM was in very good form, I can say that much. Do you know who I am?
He's a Tory MEP. The Prime Minister and her team are focused on trying to scrape the Conservative Party back together again.
What did the Prime Minister have to say?
Well, it would be wrong of me to tell you what the Prime Minister had to say.
Theresa May has been trying to lure pro-Brexit rebels like Ian Duncan-Smith to back her deal by promising she might be able to soften the backstop in ways she had said were impossible.
It is a bit baffling to people.
Well, it shouldn't be baffling that a negotiation sort of continues until it either succeeds or fails. We are in the last knockings of this negotiation.
So the extra pressure might do it this time because of the ticking clock.
Well,
or it might give us something that Theresa May herself has said they won't.
Well, they've said that they're not going to change, but if they don't change, then there's not going to be a deal that gets through the House of Commons. And since it is in everyone's interest to get a deal, and since also, let's be honest, there's a history in European negotiations of things going absolutely to the last minute. Well, we are now approaching the last minute. March the 29th is the last minute. We're nearly in February, so I think minds will be focused and concentrated in ways that they perhaps haven't been in the past.
And that appears to be Theresa May's hope as she swept into Parliament tonight. The EU will soften more than they say, and Tory MPs will come into line scared of losing Brexit altogether.
Many of us always thought that the EU was more likely to move as we came closer to the end point of the negotiations. And in fact, over the last couple of weeks, we've seen a little bit more flexibility from some on the EU negotiating side.
But tonight, pro-Brexit Tory MPs said Sir Graham Brady's amendment didn't rewrite the Brexit deal enough. And they appeared to kill off Theresa May's latest strategy, even as she was launching it down the corridor.
Does this feel like a last throw of the dice?
Well, the last four throws of the dice have felt like the last throw of the dice, and what we discover is that until we get to March the 29th, there might always be another chance.
Might be, might not. One cabinet minister said he expected all the amendments with real teeth tomorrow to fail. And Theresa May, he said, would simply say she was ploughing on anyway.
Gary Gibbon. Well, now with me here is the Conservative MP Andrew Bridgen, a long-standing Brexit supporter and a member of the European Research Group. Andrew Bridgen, will you be backing Mrs May tomorrow?
Well, Sir Graham made a pitch at the 1922 committee meeting, which the Prime Minister attended, pushing his amendment, and I'm struggling to support it. Although it says it'll get rid of the backstop, it says to replace it with alternative arrangements without specifying what those alternative arrangements might be.
I was rather hoping you'd tell me what they're going to be.
We weren't told what they would be, and I don't think anyone knows what they're going to be.
Do you think she knows what they're going to be?
And it also presumes that the only problem I have with the withdrawal agreement is the backstop. I also have concerns over the £39 billion, which we're not paying for a deal, we're paying to talk about a future deal. I also have concerns about the legal future relationship protocol, which it's clear to me when you read it that the EU's idea of our future relationship is very, very similar to the backstop.
Well, now, if you're not going to back Mrs May, and you aren't, it seems, coming up with any other amendment, I'm just wondering whether you subscribe to the view, then, that we are going to crash out without a deal.
We wouldn't be crashing out, we would be cashing in. We've been in the European Union for 47 years.
Well, even if you cash in, you have to crash out before you cash in.
We could leave on WTO, immediately offer under GATT, Article 24, 5C, I believe it is, a free trade agreement, talks, which would entitle us for up to 10 years to secure those talks. And while we did that, we could have tariff-free and quota-free trade with the European Union. That would be a very generous offer. But for the first time in 47 years, on the 29th of March at 11 p.m, the cell door is open. And what we need is politicians with the courage and the backing of the British people to walk through that door, John.
Well, that's the moment at which they throw the key away and we're in the cell.
The negotiations will go down to the wire. That's why we've got a wire. At the last minute, the 11th hour, the EU will blink and offer us better terms than we'll get now.
Where'd you get that from?
Because that's the way the EU operate. They will be taken down to the wire. They'll have to see the whites of our eyes and believe that we're going to leave on no deal to drop the backstop completely and renegotiate on the 39 billion.
Aren't you running the risk that we may not leave at all?
The Prime Minister was very clear, we're leaving the European Union. She realises that we've been mandated for that in this Parliament, and the devastating effect not leaving would have on the future electoral prospects of the Conservative Party, and the devastating effect it would have on our democracy if we didn't deliver.
Now, some of the most prestigious names on the high street, Waitrose, Co-op, all sorts of shops are warning that we will run out of fresh fruit, fresh vegetables and much else.
I worked for 22 years in the fruit and vegetable industry before I came to Parliament. You remember in 2015 we had over 20 days consecutive of strikes and disruption at the Channel ports due to French action. We didn't run out of fruit and vegetables or medicines.
It wasn't February, it wasn't midwinter.
We've had a declaration again from the President of the Port of Calais saying they're all ready. The percentage of lorries that will be stopped if we applied third-party rules, which I don't believe we will for the first few months, is 3% of vehicles. That's about 4 lorries an hour would have to be checked.
Andrew Bridgen, thank you very much indeed for coming.
Thank you.
Now, later in the programme, I was speaking to Sir Graham Brady himself about his crucial amendment and to a former Conservative Party chairman on his proposal to steer us out of the Brexit deadlock into staying. Maurice Saatchi is tabling a bill in the House of Lords that would take us on a very different course from what's being proposed here. But for the moment, back to Matt in the studio.
Thanks, John. Now, they used to say every little helps, but the cuts announced by Tesco today could hardly be bigger. The supermarket giant has announced it'll slash thousands of jobs and cut back on fresh food counters in its stores. The cuts come amid ferocious competition between the supermarkets, with the once dominant giant seeing its market share continue to decline, even though it is still the biggest in the UK. Kami Nzerum is in East London now. Kami.
Matt, as you say, more big job cuts for the high street. Tesco confirming today a big redundancy round. As many as 9,000 posts might be impacted, they said 9,000. Mainly customer-facing roles on counters in big stores, but also some head office. And I must repeat, against the rise of the discount retailers, many analysts say that Tesco's has simply lost its way. I spoke to one employee at head office this afternoon who said that as the news was announced, it was met with an air of silent resignation.
Tesco made over £1 billion in profit last year, but after widespread speculation over the weekend, today it announced another round of redundancies, blaming a competitive and challenging market. Tesco has said it wants to save £1.5 billion by next year. It confirmed today that 9,000 jobs could be impacted by this latest restructure, though it expects up to half of those to be redeployed to other roles. The main change, it'll be closing 90 fresh food counters.
I think it's the right thing for them to be doing to cut jobs on the counters because people aren't using the counters as much. However, the overall job cuts are not going to do enough for cost. It's going to save a certain amount of money, maybe 75 million or thereabouts, but in the scheme of things, if they need to save 1.5 billion, they've got other costs to consider, like business rates, like property costs, like, costs of investment and logistics. So they really need to think about those costs too. And jobs clearly, are a motive. They affect people's livelihoods. It's an issue, and it's obviously not a good PR move for them either.
The shop workers union Usdaw, which represents around half of Tesco's 320,000 employees, said it was devastating news for staff who've helped the store deliver 12 successive quarters of growth. These cuts will also affect Tesco's supply chain.
It's extremely serious. It may only be 10, 20, 30 in each store, but the repercussions are massive because some stores will obviously take a bigger hit. And it's not just about the stores, it's about the thousands of people working in the supply chains as well that are delivering to stores this will have a really big impact. And we just want the clarity. We want Tesco to come clean with exactly what their plans are.
Tesco is the very definition of mid-market. It's squeezed between the quality retailers and the discounters like Aldi and Lidl. Tesco launched Jack's to compete. Sainsbury's relaunched Netto, which folded. A changing high street which has contributed to Sainsbury's proposed merger with Asda, which is still being considered by the Competition and Markets Authority. Analysts predict a rough future for the middle.
Well, 2018 was a dreadful year for retail, and unfortunately 2019 doesn't look much better at all. There's going to be more store closures, there's going to be more retailers going bankrupt, and unfortunately with the political instability that we're seeing with regards to Brexit, it really does point to a very difficult few months ahead.
Tesco is still the second biggest employer in the UK after the NHS. What happens to Tesco matters.
Kami and Zohan reporting.
Where Theresa May is pinning her hopes tonight on returning to Brussels to secure changes in the Irish backstop, despite Ireland and the EU negotiators saying talks cannot be restarted. We asked a friend from Ireland to explain the backstop and how it has twisted Anglo-Irish relations.
The Irish backstop was agreed by the EU. And yes, by the Prime Minister, and was signed off by all in November's withdrawal agreement. And we know what happened to that.
The ayes to the right, 202. The noes to the left, 432.
So what is this backstop? If there is no future trade deal signed by December 2022, then the backstop applies to trade between the UK and the EU across the Irish border. The whole of the UK becomes a single customs territory with no tariffs. That then avoids the hard border checks which would be needed under EU rules if the UK left the single market and customs union. Many of your Brexiteers and the Democratic Unionists dislike it because the UK and EU have to agree together to end it. And their fear is being trapped in the EU forever. But what's the problem with a hard border? Well, remember those 30 years of the Troubles. When peace was signed in the Good Friday Agreement, all sides agreed to remove the border security checks. And that was approved by, oh yes, a referendum both north and south of the border. The Irish border has been an issue for years. When it was agreed in London in 1921, it led to a civil war, and it didn't end well for Michael Collins, the Irish negotiator who signed it off. Today, Brexiteers are dismissing the border issue as bogus. Many in Ireland say one of them, Priti Patel, seems to have forgotten the devastating Irish famine when she suggested economic hardship be used as political leverage. And on Saturday, the BBC's John Humphreys, in a somewhat unique approach to Irish history, posed the question, should Dublin leave the EU and tag along with the UK? Really, John? There are 60 days until Brexit.